Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be giving my review of the challenge Total Madness. And I didn't really care for the season when it aired about 5 years ago, and I rewatched it last season and I was kind of higher on it, but there are elements of it that I grew to dislike more, and I kind of feel like that now. But this time that I rewatched the season, I watched all the other prior seasons, where when I rewatched it last season, I only watched the second half of the show's history. So I have a bigger understanding of the franchise and where I would rank this season. And I'll say that I don't think it's going to be a bottom 10 season, but it's definitely not a higher tier season at all, in my opinion. I will say that I do think that this is the last cast that had a solid group of rookies, where they mainly cast them from American reality shows, whether it was from Big Brother or The Amazing Race, or even Are You the One, though they tried branding that person differently at the time, only to recognize that they're an MTV personality. And I feel like they did this because the earlier Big Brother group, i.e. Apolly, Brayvon, Jose, Natalie, and Victor, at this point in time were done with the show and they needed a new group of Big Brother people, and these would be the ones that kind of carried through the rest of the era, and they kind of had an easier time. And I think they were trying out their Amazing Race to see what they could get out of it, and I think another reason why they mainly reached out to American shows for the rookie crop was because they did the opposite last season, where they reached out to the UK group solely for that season, and they only reached out to UK people, and most of them kind of flopped in the season from a character and competitive point of view, where we only had Jenny and Tula back, and they're the only two from that season who's done more seasons up until this date. So I think they realized that they needed to get more American rookies. And I do think that they were a success for the most part, though the longest lasting ones from this season are the most boring on the season. So I kind of found that to be interesting. And in general, when I'm just looking at the veterans, I do think that this is one of the last solid vet casts overall, since we definitely did have a lot of Era 3 people, though you'd start to see some of them like a Jenna and a Kayla winding down. Corey was off his punishment, and Nelson wasn't on the last two seasons, so they kind of came back here. We had the return of Anissa, who didn't appear at all within the era as a competitor. This would be the final Banana season for at least another few years, where he's not appearing as regularly on the flagship after this show. And we had the last kind of crop of the world's people, from the likes of a Maddie, a Bear, a D, and I don't know if you'd consider Rogan in there, but a lot of them had their last seasons here. In general, I really do think they overcorrected from War of the Worlds 2, where there's a lot of complaints about many of the finalists not going into elimination that season. So they decided to implement the skull twist here, where in order to get to the final, you needed to go into an elimination to get your skull, since that would indicate that you're eligible to be in the final. And honestly, I think it made the season boring as fuck. Strategically, there's really just very little going on, and we just had everyone volunteering to go in for most other rounds in the season, and it really just took the intrigue out of it. And it really just made the season more boring, and it made it less competitive, when I feel like the intention of the skull twist was to make it more competitive. And then the bunker, I really just didn't like it. They were suffering from the lack of oxygen in there. It was very dark and gloomy. And that's another element of the latter portion of the era that I do feel like the season introduced, where there was somewhat of a shift, where we had the not the ambivalence, the overwhelming darkness of the clothing, where it was in all black, it was very muted, it was less colorful. You had all the explosions that started this season, you had all the challenges and the scenery that was just black and dreary and kind of dull to look at, which will continue on to the spy seasons that went on up until 38. So, yeah. But I do feel like this was the last It's one of the last, if not the last season that had that MTV ratchetness that the show was associated with, where there's still a decent amount of trashiness and a decent amount of fight as well. But something about it just, I think it's due to the fact that this was around the era where everyone was trying to be woke. So yeah. Anyways, let's just get right to the actual review. The cast arrive to the Czech Republic and are taken to their home, or what they presume will be their home. Jenna is tired of not winning, Asaf is cocky for no reason, and we have a bunch of people from Big Brother 20 appearing here. And like I mentioned earlier, clearly they were over the first crop of BP challengers at this point, so they needed a refresher. And this would be the last time where a bunch of BP people from a specific season was cast together. Anyways, it is an individual season, though some dailies will be in teams, duos, or individual, and the cast are taken to their first daily, Battle Lines, where they have to pull a rope of medical supplies, and if TJ rolls over the rope in his car, that person is out, where they then have to accomplish a math puzzle. Nani is eyeing Asaf, and it's crazy that... Sorry. It is crazy that when they mention him, or when he speaks about it, he references literally every other show that he's been on, but an MTV show where he was on Are You the One, the actual season, and the second chances of Are You the One. Though they revert this on 39, where they emphasize the fact that he is an MTV personality from Are You the One. Anyways, and Jordan and Tori really want to win this so Tori can win the season, but he would like to win with her as well. But the main goal is to get Tori to win. And Kyle and Rogan still have a somewhat friendly and somewhat real rivalry going on, going all the way back to Vendettas. Corey talks about how his girlfriend, Taylor, is pregnant with their first child. Faisal talks about his ACL injury, which ended his athletic career, which will explain his choices on the show overall. Bear is eyeing Kayla, who has a boyfriend. Bailey is there with her fiancé Swaggy, though they were actually married by this time. But she is going to go hard for her man. And Jenny mentions that she trained very hard since last season in preparation for the season. I do think that the daily is pretty solid, but we have Rogan winning for the guys and Jenny winning for the women. The two of them are in the tribunal and they can choose a third member, which is Corey, as they ignore Bear begging them to choose him to go in. One guy has to be nominated by the House, and the tribunal chooses 3 other guys to be interrogated, where one of them will be chosen. And this will also be the last season of the tribunal, which is unfortunate in my opinion. They arrive to the house, which is a bunker underground, and it really is a horrible setting. Everyone is wondering where the luxuries are, and some of them are in one room overall. And they apparently had oxygen pumped into the house because there was a lack of it. Jen is talking about how her show, The Amazing Race, prepared her for this, and we learned that Wes and Bananas pre-gamed, where Jordan notices that the both of them were booted early last season. Jay is from Survivor, and he thinks that this is a vacation compared to Survivor. Ashley is talking to Big T about how Nani, Kayla, and Jenna are in an alliance that needs to be taken care of, and the 3 women name themselves the Holy Trinity. Ashley is trying to get anyone she can, as her allies from last season are not here, and neither are her allies from Final Reckoning, and Tula is gravitating towards Ashley at this point. Rogan still feels awkward about Dee, and Dee still has feelings for him, but she will have no problem making his life hell if he hooks up with someone else, and this is just really pick-me behavior. Nani and Asaf are getting close, where she notices that he is by himself, and she tells him that he will bond with people on the show that he will carry relationships with outside of the house. And we do know that that happens with Jay. And Ashley is shading Nani over her infatuation with Asaf. Kyle is over people seeing him as a snake, and CT gives him advice on how to kill that perception. And people are watching Ashley like a hawk since they don't trust her, and she's really by herself this season. Bear is flirting with Kayla, and we see Jay and Asaf talking, where they get along pretty well. We know that they get very close by 39, where Jay is like an uncle or like a godparent to Asaf's kid. And we'll get more into that friendship there. And he encourages Asaf to hook up with Nani, where the two kiss in front of everyone. Kyle is mentioning that Asaf is a sweet, innocent guy, and the challenge is going to ruin him, which is so ironic based on what his perception is after 39. But we move on to the pair hooking up in their bunk bed. Jay speaks to the Big Brother 20 crew about how the 4 male rookies are going to be targeted this round, and Bailey mentions that to the woman like Asaph, but if they vote Swiggy, she will handle all of them. At the nomination ceremony, the votes are split between Jay and Asaph, and Bailey gets mad that Jay uses Swiggy as an example of having someone or whatever. It's just ridiculous. And Wes gets mad that Asaph votes for Wes. Asaph mentions that Wes is a snake and he will go down against the best. And Wes just likes to manipulate things, where Wes calls him a follower and calls him a piece of shit and a pussy. And Wes has been calm all season. I don't know why Wes got so riled up by Asaph, of all people, and Wes calls himself a possum with a beard. Bananas is calming Wes down, and they are trying to build up this huge thing about Wes and Bananas working together, and I'm not going to waste much time on this on my review. Both of them have been playing up their feud for the last several seasons for TV time, though it's clear that they're cool off season, and they even get a shared confessional, which just makes my eyes roll. The Tribunal nominates Kyle, Jay, and Wes, though they make it clear that Jay is going to be nominated anyways. Bear, Josh, and Nanny feel bad for Asaph, and Nelson is giving Jay advice. They don't talk about how Nelson and Jay are friends, which might have been due to the X on the Beach season that they did a year prior to this. Jay is nominated by the tribunal, where the 2 men compete in airstrike, where they will be hanging on a wall like 30 feet in the air, and they're in between a wall. Sorry, they're hanging on a rope, and a wall is in between them, where they had to kick the other off by kicking the wall. And they did a similar elimination during the first round of the Inferno 2, if I'm remembering correctly. It's a pretty decent elimination, and of course the friends are disappointed with having to go against one another, but Jay easily beats Asaph here. Apparently, Nanny planned to send him a DM after the season. We all know that went absolutely nowhere, as the future fiancé, Casey, is on the season, and that will interrupt whatever happened between Nanny and Asaph. It is announced that after winning an elimination, they get a skull, which is a ticket to get to the final, and if you don't have a skull, you won't get to the final. But skull can be taken from you, even if you get it. So, Rogan knows that TJ is referring to him when it comes to people skating by last season. I don't like this twist at all, and it made the season so much worse. I'm honestly shocked that it took them this long to cast Asaph, since he was on Second Chances like 3 to 4 years before this, and this Are You the One season was 5 years before this. But they kind of blew it with the Are You the One cast after a while. He did have some drama with Wes and had a hookup with Nanny, while his friendship with Jay actually became really strong and would carry on to 39. He was more likable here on one episode than he was on 3/4 of a second season, but he isn't the worst casting choice, though them trying to ignore him being on Are You the One was weird as hell. Everyone comes back from the elimination and they are immediately plotting about how to go into elimination to get to their skull, and CT mentions that a bunch of people will throw their friends in, but he knows that he thrived on intimidating people to stay out of elimination throughout his career, where he and Jenny know that people will try and want to freeze them out of getting the opportunity to get to their skulls by not putting them into elimination. Ashley thrives on not going into eliminations, so going in definitely isn't a good thing for her. And Jordan is talking about how he wants to get Tori to the end so she can win, and now he wants her to go in. Pretty much. Tula is talking about how she worked out since last season, and she wants to prove herself. She actually only got on the season because, from what I remember, Bria from Are You the One 7 rejected it. So Tula is still seen as new, and it's pretty fair, to be honest. Jen and Rogan are talking, where she wants him to give her advice, and he mentions that she is beautiful and he is eyeing her, though she realizes that some of the women, especially Dee, do not like that she is speaking to Rogan, with him just wanting to have fun this season. Dee is complaining about this to Tori, and the two of them agree to look out for one another, where Tori mentions that she was the only woman to win last season, so she needs to play Rogan, since she has the power. Airdrop extraction is the daily, where they have to transfer military crates as fast as possible, where in the second round, one person will go onto the plane to drop 9 targets, where this daily is played in teams. Jen knows that she is a target, and I really didn't care about this daily, but we have Swiggy, Corey, and Dee winning, hence them being in the tribunal, where Jordan has to freak out due to losing the daily, since he can't give Tori the tribunal, where it really just One, it shows that he isn't the best loser, and two, it just shows how overwhelming he is putting himself and Tori with how he's acting regarding this skull situation. So, Jenny, and Corey are talking where she wants to give one of the women a chance to beat Jen in elimination, since everyone knows that she is an easy beat, and Jenny wants to be the woman sent in, promising that she will scratch Dee and Corey's back in the future. Well, this, especially with Corey, will be something that doesn't really get fulfilled. Big T also wants to go into elimination where she is pitching it to Vassal. Dee speaks to Rogan about how Jen is going to be voted in, and she prides and pokes at him about it, which is pretty funny to watch, but he mentions that he won't have loyalty to Jen. Bananas and Wes literally script a speech for Jen to say at the nomination ceremony where the two men are having fun with it, since they want to make a monotonous, unceremonious ceremony a bit more interesting. Even Bear, Nelson, and Rogan join in on the room and conversation to help her out, and she calls the people fellow Earthlings in her speech, which does not go well at all. She calls herself a star and an investment despite being weak, and people are not feeling it at all. And then she throws another rookie under the bus. Damn near everyone but 3 people votes in Jen. We have Dee and Jen arguing with one another about how Jen called Dee out for trashing her. Dee asks her what did she say, and then Rogan was somehow brought into it, and Dee wants Jen to say it to her face. Jen mentions that Dee wanted her in, where Dee says that the entire house wants her in. Jen mentions that Dee was watching her sleep, and all of this is just so ridiculous. And Dee is embarrassing, or sorry, she is embarrassing, but she's embracing her mean girl here, where she also tells Jen that she'll be watching her tonight, which is just odd and creepy. Tori and Dee are talking about how they need to get their skull, where she wants to go into the elimination, but Jenny is Dee's number one girl, so Tori is not her first priority with the skull situation. Jordan and Tori are talking, and she realizes that she might be the first woman to get a skull, and Jordan mentions that he and Tori were the ones who gave her the win last season, and he mentions that Dee is playing like Wes. Both of them are as titled as hot in the situation. Dee doesn't owe them shit with the situation, and they didn't give Dee the win, especially since Tori couldn't even give herself the win last season, so, ugh. The two women talk again in their lockers to speak about the pitch, and Dee realizes that she's being threatened, which she doesn't appreciate, and Dee promised Jenny on and off camera that she's going to send her in and she'll look out for her. Before the tribunal nominations, Dee reports this to Swaggy and Corey, and they're annoyed with Jordan's attitude, where he didn't even congratulate them on their win, so Jordan's really just rubbing people the wrong way this season. Jenny, Tori, and Tula are nominated, and we have Jenny making care pitch of protection, and Tori mentions the final situation once again. Dee mentions that they didn't work together until the final last season, which is true. Tori mentions that she didn't want to work with... Tori mentioned that Dee didn't work with Jenny last season either, but Dee mentions that she's the only one she made an agreement with before coming into the season, but she knows that the couple will probably target her now. Dee speaks about this to Wes, and they talk about how Tula wants to wait longer to go in, so she wants to put in Jenny, and Wes mentions that if Jenny gets the skull, she can have an easy run to the final, which essentially ends up happening. We get to the elimination where Jenny is made the other nominee by the tribunal, as Dee refuses to volunteer herself to go down herself, where she's clowned for it by the edit and some of the other cast members. The elimination is flip the switch, where they have to flip 10 barrels to their partner side and flip a switch to win the elimination. It's a decent enough elimination, but Jenny completely dog walks Jen in this elimination, doing it with one hand. I honestly didn't mind Jen at all during her short run here. She had a drama with Dee and could have flirted it up, but she had no concept of the game from a competitive and strategic and especially a social point of view, and I remember her victimizing herself on Twitter against the entire cast too when this was airing, so I quickly got over her, but she isn't the worst. I'm not clamoring to see her back though. CT, Rogan, Bananas, and Cal are talking about how they are going to get their skull, and more than one person is going to want to get their skull. Dee and Jay are speaking, and he's joking about her boyfriend glaring at him, where Dee admits that she definitely wants to piss Rogan off, though Jay knows that this won't end well for him at all. Swaggy covers Bailey with a blanket that has their faces on it, and Anissa shades it in the confessional. And it is kind of ridiculous, so I guess it's cute in their own way. People are talking about how Ashley changed, or how she consistently changes, And Bananas mentions that Ashley uses her social game every season, and she pretends to be dumb. Where Nani mentions in the confessional that Bananas and Ashley essentially plays the same game, but he can't manipulate Ashley, which is why he's annoyed. Bananas does not intend to speak to her this season, and there's still tension from last season, and Ashley overhears this. She rants about this to Jenny, where she does not believe that she's a bad person or a fake person, and despite being in a different alliance, she respects everyone. Bananas walks into the room and interrupts their conversation, where Ashley is tired of people saying incorrect things about her. Bananas calls her out for switching alliances like she changes underwear every season, and she doesn't apologize for having friends, unlike him. She mentions that she has more money than him and is a better politiker than him. The daily is decode and detonate, where they have to get the key to your code, complete the puzzle, and blow up the detonator. People still want to go after Jay despite him already having a skull. So this is the start of a lot of the explosions and stuff that takes over the next half of the era, and I didn't really care for this challenge. CT and Bailey win the tribunal, where they're going back and forth about letting Swaggy in the tribunal, since she's worried that he'll be voted in otherwise, and CT is worried since Big Brother people are untrustworthy, but he lets it happen. So it's clear that the mantra of Big Brother still carries on here, even though the earlier Big Brother people aren't on the show at this point. So Jay is clearly going in again, though some of the women are talking about not wanting to do so, but Ashley is campaigning for Johnny to get sent in, where Dee mentions that she is planning to burn her vote, since she isn't voting for Jay. Kayla reports this back to Corey and Nelson, that Jay might not be voted in, and it might be Bananas, where Ashley tells them, and Faisal as well. Clearly, Corey and Nelson have history with Bananas from their Young Bucks days, so them, Faisal, Kyle, and Swaggy are reporting this to West, thinking that he would be done with the vote, but he really isn't done. A few people are burning their votes, where Nelson is mad that he is getting votes, and he's throwing Kayla under the bus, where she is yelling at him because she was letting him in! I was letting you in, you idiot! And Nelson is yelling at her, since Kayla mentions that she never intended on voting out Bananas, where even Corey defends Kayla here, and he wants them to be peaceful. West saves Bananas from being voted in, and Jay does get voted in again. Actually, no, he wasn't voted in the first time. But he gets voted in here. He was chosen by the tribunal last time, my bad. Where Bananas and West have an obnoxious celebration that I don't give a shit about. Ashley and Bananas then argue, where he calls her out for her shitty plan. She mentions that people like her and not him, and he is a grandpa, where she tells everyone to vote her in next time since she doesn't give a fuck. Dee wants Ashley to keep it together since she's her ally, as they did work together last season, though working with one another at one moment won't matter for Dee, as we will see throughout the season. And it's Halloween, and they're dressing up in their costumes, and they go to the club, where we do see Dee and Jay making out, which Jenny encourages. And Roken definitely notices, where he is annoyed that Jay is doing this, so he better enjoy his last night. Roken moves out of their room, and Roken wants to go to elimination to face Jay, and we see the ex-couple argue, where he mentions that he cares about them kissing, and she should fuck Jay, or at least that's what he's telling her, though she mentions that it isn't what she wants, and she didn't like him flirting with Jennifer either. Rogan complains about Jay to CT, and he wants to kill Jay in the elimination, where CT wants Rogan to give him a chance to get his skull, and he will help Rogan in the future get his skull, if he gives CT this favor. The Tribunal nominates Nelson, Rogan, and Bear, where people are getting annoyed with Nelson's behavior, where Nelson mentions that he was blindsided, and everyone does see Jay as a layup. Rogan and Jay are arguing since he calls out Rogan for not going into elimination last season, but now wants to go against the smallest guy this season, and Rogan admits that this is all true. Jay mentions that Bagley and Swaggy are his friends, so he'll do whatever he can to make sure Rogan never gets his skull this season. And Rogan mentions that if it isn't CT, it'll be himself who takes Jay out. Well, that did end up manifesting. CT steps in to go into elimination for the skull, where he and Jay compete in Take Shelter, where they have to use anything to tie their jail cell or whatever, where they then have to get to the opponent's cell or bunker to untie it. We do see Jay pull this one out, where he took out his idol, and everyone is completely shocked since everyone expected CT to completely wash him here. I don't really care too much for the actual elimination, but the results is fun. CT was so worried about getting frozen out from getting a skull, which is why he wanted himself, but it caused him to get booted early, which was not uncommon for him when it comes to the first portion of Era 4. He had some decent confessionals, but he didn't last long enough to make a big impression, and I don't have much to say about him overall. But this will teach him a lesson about how he needs to get himself in shape for the next few seasons, where he did learn to improve. Jay is more than thrilled with his win, and Ashley is telling Maddie that she knows she or Big T will be voted in next, where it seems like she's aligning with Maddie since they promised to not strike at one another. And I wonder why they are conveniently showing this now. Kayla and Bear are flirting, where she mentions that he's obnoxious and good looking, but she can't hook up with him. And Anissa is eavesdropping on them while this is happening, which is just so Anissa. A bunch of the cats are in the room, and Bear sprays the fire extinguisher all over the room, where they are trapped in a basement, where there's already a lack of oxygen, so it really just shows how decrepit Bear is in general. So Ashley goes off on Bear, and he doesn't care about what he just did, so she spits on his face, where Maddie ends up going off on Ashley for spitting on him. Some people do think that it is funny, and she is pissed because she has spray toxins in her mouth, and it really just makes their poor life even poorer. And getting rid of extinguisher stuff is just really, really hard. So I get her frustration, though spitting definitely out of the lot. Maddie mentions that Ashley had worse in her mouth and that Ashley needs to sit down, where Ashley throws Maddie going to jail in her face, which pisses Maddie off, and I think it involved a DUI, and Ashley calls Maddie a dick sucker. Honestly, Maddie should have just sat there and shut the fuck up, or else she wouldn't have caught all those strays. Nani tells Maddie to shut the fuck up, and she is pissed off about the bear situation. So Natty and Maddie start arguing back and forth, since Maddie wasn't in the room, so she really has no right to have an opinion on it. But it's clear that Ashley is on her way out of the house by now. So the daily is Cold War, where they are playing in teams of 5, and some of them have to go into the cold ice water to get a puzzle piece, where other people are chopping ice in the water, where they then have to complete the puzzle. I don't care for this daily. I think it's actually very cruel, especially when it involves making cold water even colder, and some people start getting borderline hypothermia. Nelson had to be taken to the hospital due to him getting hypothermia, and I don't know why the producers thought that this was a good idea. And it was also a boring challenge to watch. Tula, Casey, Bear, Anissa, and Bananas win the daily and will be in the tribunal. And Kyle talks to Maddie about how Ashley is very untrustworthy, and it's clear that Ashley is dealing with the backlash of what happened last season. Nelson returns to the house, and Ashley is easily nominated by the house, where Dee is making it very clear that she doesn't trust Ashley because she is a liability, and Ashley is tearing up after the ceremony. And this will kind of just show how Dee's pathology is throughout the season when it comes to gameplay. Everyone goes to the club, and Bananas is trying to prop up Tula, saying that she would have been nominated if she wasn't in the tribunal, and is encouraging her to make deals. And apparently she's one of his favorite people, but I don't really know if that's true or he just likes laughing at her. We do see her get a bit power hungry, which we'll see more of next season, where she speaks to Nani, Kayla, and Jenna as she wants deals from them, and she kind of mentions that they are targets, which Nani doesn't really believe since most of her friends are in the tribunal. Bear is talking to Rogan and Wes about Kayla, and I'm just really over him at this point, where it also seemed like he was doing this for camera time more than anything else. Dee's game is clocked by the tribunal, mentioning that she is worse than Ashley, so she, Tori, who wants to go in, and Maddie are nominated. Maddie does not want to go in this round. Tori really wants to go in, but if it's a puzzle, she does not want to go in, so she refuses to make a deal with Tula, and Dee does want to go in here, since she missed her shot last round against Jen, and Dee admitted that she was an accomplice in targeting Bananas last round, which he isn't thrilled with, but at least she's being honest here. Tori and Dee do not appreciate how the tribunal treated them, and we get to the elimination. Dee is voted in to face Ashley, where it is Codebreaker, where they have to roll the ring, and they then have to find the tile that is above, but they have to roll it on a large roll that they're standing over, or on, and then they have to put the order of past challenge seasons, which Dee is annoyed by since the show doesn't even air in Australia, which just really shows how dumb the whole international thing is that they've been pushing for like the last 6 or 7 years, since the show doesn't even air in these countries that they're recruiting these people from. Anyways, a lot of the people actually want Dee gone now, but Wes essentially causes her throughout the elimination, especially the part about the seasons. But Dee wins and Ashley is sent home, where she mentions how glad she is to be out of the bunker, and this would be a consistent thing as the season goes on, especially from what was mentioned in exit interviews. And she calls out Wes for helping Dee in the elimination, mentioning how Jenny and her own grandmother will beat him in the final, and he's really just confused by this. I do like the chaos Ashley brought during the short time she was on the season, and she couldn't adapt the same way she did in prior seasons. Her fighting with Bananas, Bear, Maddie, and I guess Wes at the very end was pretty fun, but I also think her gameplay from last season, and people still remembering what she did on Final Reckoning, also followed her, but it showed how inconsistent she is as a player, since if she's not at the end, she'll be in early bridge too, and this path would definitely continue from here. Dee is happy to be back, though a lot of people actually wanted her gone, and people are doing a Ouija board, where it's clear that Kayla and Bear are getting closer and closer. Jenna calls Zach via the video phone calls, where they have been good over the last 2 years. Roken wants to get his revenge on Jay for kissing Dee and sending CT home, who was one of his allies, and Jay knows that he is still a target. Wes thinks that Josh is obsessed with him due to Josh running a treadmill beside him and looking at him. Wes thinks Josh is delusional, and Josh thinks that Wes sees him as a threat. Jordan and Wes are arguing since Jordan does not want the turf that they use to work out on to be fucked up. Wes calls Jordan an asshole, and he agrees. Wes then goes to Jordan, and Jordan does not want Wes in his face. They are pretty much going back and forth. Jordan holds this long meat piece to Wes's face, and Wes mentions that Jordan won't talk to him like he talks to his wife, and Jordan doesn't like Wes speculating on his relationship, and he wins because he is mentally in the game. I remember when Wes and Jordan argued on Battle of the XS2, and it was very intense, so I do like it when the two of them argue, since they're both good at it, and they're both very arrogant as well. Kayla talks to Jenna about Bear and how she is clear that nothing is going to happen between them. Wes complains to Dee, and they plot to send Jordan into elimination. The daily is Bomb Squad, where they're in teams of 4, where one person has to ride a leaning car, the second person has to be recited equations from the first portion, the third person has to wait for the second person to run to them and recite the answer, which is tied to color poles, and then the fourth person has to put it in the detonator, which will explode. The daily is fine enough, but it reminds me too much of the unnecessary late era 4 explosions that took over every challenge. Swaggy, Josh, Casey, and... why do I have Kenny here? Who's the fourth person who won this? Oh, okay. Jenny, Josh. Yes, Jenny. I don't know why I wrote Kenny there. That must have been a mistake. Anyways, Swaggy, Josh, Casey, and Jenny win the daily, and Jay and Jenna are speaking about the vote, where he is hoping that Wes's plan to send in Jordan takes place. So it's clear Wes spread this plan to a few people if Jay already knows about it. Though Jenna essentially knows that it isn't happening. Jordan knows about Wes's plan. Wow. Word travels quickly. And a bunch of people agree that Wes is building a target on himself, since a lot of people do not actually want to send Jordan in. Bananas is encouraging Wes not to do it, and then he calls them outright about the two of them working together. A few of them are voting for Bear, but Jay does end up getting the vote again, and he's just over the situation, since it's pointless to continuously get targeted. The cast goes to the club, where Wes is complaining to Nelson about not getting the votes for Jordan, and even Nelson is over Wes. Swaggy is kind of upset for Jay since they've been allies the entire seasons, and he's hoping that Jay keeps his head up. And Roken rants about Jay disrespecting him, so Roken wants to go onto the floor to put his hands on Jay. Bear has a girlfriend, but he hasn't even called her since the season started, which just shows how awful he is, though we eventually see and hear Kayla and Bear hooking up in the washu, and they're clearly trying to do so that the camera can't see them, and literally when they leave the washroom, Kayla sees the camera in her face, and Kayla admits in the confessional that she's disappointed that the cameras caught them. The tribunal nominates Rogan, Nelson, and Wes, and Josh tries to start an argument with Wes about the ladder coming for him, where Wes tells Josh that he is a layup slash non-threat, so he will never go after Josh, since he goes after people who can beat him in the final. Wes shutting Josh down in a series, but Conway is just so fun. Cal tells Jay that Rogan wants to go in a physical, and Jay calls him out for only wanting to go in a physical elimination, insinuating that Rogan sucks at everything else, but Rogan feels like he'll be more confident if it's physical, and he can get what he wants, where he does the absolutely most. Sorry. The elimination that Rogan volunteers for is balls in, which Rogan saw once they made it to the elimination. So Rogan feels even more confident, and he gets what he wants, where he does the absolute most, unnecessarily so on the elimination, thinking that it will scare Jay and some of the others, but it just makes him look like a little bitch. It is called Fireball because the ball's on fire and they have to get 3 scores, but it doesn't even get that far. Ultimately, Jay is DQ'd because the producers realize that he has a concussion after Rogan slammed him. I did enjoy Jay on the season, as he had a decent amount of drama, had that underdog spirit, and transferred onto TV pretty well for a CBS personality, especially a Survivor personality. Though they clearly wanted him on for a few years at this point, since he was almost on War of the Worlds, and he was on X on the Beach a year prior to this. It really is so shocking that he came back to the show after the season, though his position on future seasons never really changed, but he eventually became the person on his first season probably wouldn't like, ironically enough, but I enjoyed him here. Dee and Rogan are happy that it is just the two of them now, and people are talking about the DQ, but Kyle calls Jay arrogant, and Rogan says that he gave Jay what he wanted, so essentially it's clear that a lot of cast just didn't like Jay like that. Tori really wants to get her skull, and we move on to Jenna calling Zach, where he is dodging her calls now. Kayla doesn't want to be homeless because she knows that this will get out regarding the situation with Bear, and the bunker is driving her crazy, where she's been living with her boyfriend for about 2 to 3 years now. Jenna calls her friend, and her friend tells her that Zach looked at her DMs from 2 years ago, and he's mad about it, since he wants her to go home, and she realizes that she should not have came, despite Zach dating other people during their break as well, which makes him look so hypocritical. Nanny and Anissa are consoling her and mention that she should stay in the game, since she will regret it if she leaves. Jenny, Dee, Melissa, and Tula are talking about the whole situation with Jenna, so it clearly got around the entire house quickly. And she complained about it to Tori and Jordan. Bear wants to decorate the room for Kayla, and I don't give a single fuck about this, and I don't give a fuck about Wes and Vanessa's joint confessionals. Kayla is mad about the pictures of her boyfriend being put in her bed, made about her and Bear, where it was above where, when she was laying, it would have been on the ceiling where she saw it, and that's clearly all Bananas and Wes's doing. And apparently Bear didn't know about the pictures with Kayla and her boyfriend on the ceiling. Wes doesn't feel bad for Kayla, since she was worried about the shithead that was Bear, and honestly, Wes does have a point about this. And Kayla is really mad because she was being disrespected, and she throws her mic as well as a few drinks across the kitchen area, so the bunker is clearly getting to her. Kayla feels like she ruined her relationship for absolutely nothing, and thinks that he doesn't even care about her. Jenna calls Zach, where he finally answers, since he's pissed off about her not being a forthcoming person, where she mentions that she never cheated on him, and he doesn't believe it. She asks him if he wants her to come home, and he wants her to talk it out, but she doesn't even give him a good answer. And it's been alleged that Zach was reading spoilers at the time, where it was revealed that someone was cheating while filming, so it might, emphasis on might, have been why he's acting like this, but it didn't come out as to who it was, at least when they were recording this conversation. People are talking about how both Kayla and Jenna are checked out, so some of the women wants to go in now and to go against them. We see this with Bailey as she's speaking to Wes and Swanky, where Wes and Bailey apparently grew up in the same town, and no one knows about the three of them having a pre-game alliance, essentially. The daily is Fast and Furious, where they will be in pairs where they are tethered to their partner to get puzzle pieces from the side of the truck and hand it to their partner to solve it. Josh is called out for his piss poor performance. The same thing with Anissa, to the point where Nelson accuses her of throwing the daily, where she just generally screwed up, and Nelson thinks that she did it so she could go against Jenna in the elimination. Bananas mentions that Anissa gets by due to being the oldest vet, despite sucking in the physical element, and what Nelson is stating is starting to show that the mentality of the house, or what the mentality is in regards to Jenna. And we see Anissa and Nelson arguing in their final team confessional. Nelson snaps at Kayla for defending Anissa, and they are arguing when they are back with the cast, and Bailey has the freak out on Jordan as they are arguing where she threatens to punch the cameraman, which is lovely for her. Due to her screwing up in the challenge, essentially, as she feels like Jordan did poorly in the challenge because he wants to help Nany go into elimination with Jenna, but I don't care too much for this daily at all. Jordan and Nany win the daily, since Jordan had to go twice, hence him doing it with Nany and Bailey, and they chose Jenna to go into the tribunal with them. Tori is campaigning to get herself voted in as a vote, since everyone knows that Jenna is checked out, so she will probably go home. Nany mentions that she puts Jenna in the tribunal so she can have her choice to whether she wants to go in or not, since she was going to be the vote anyways, and Jenna wants to see if it's meant to be for her in this season or not. Nany talks about wanting Jenny out, so she doesn't want Jenna to go in the elimination, since Jenny being a guaranteed finalist is dumb for all of the women, which we saw that how that went out. Nelson talks to Kyle, Dee, and Jenny about the presumed plan of Jenna, and Dee and Jenny are worried about if Jenna doesn't quit and doesn't volunteer herself to go into elimination, one of them will be sent in against Tori, which is kind of what Nany was trying to push a few minutes earlier on the episode. Tori tells Casey and Josh that she wants to go into elimination as a loser, and Anissa rants to Bailey about Anissa's ranting to Bailey about how Nelson treated her during the daily, and Bailey is also not over how Jordan treated her in the daily as well. And the both of them know that they are on the outs with the woman, especially the Holy Trinity. And it's interesting seeing this conversation since Bailey would trash Anissa on the All-Stars feeds, and I remember Anissa responding to it online when it happened. So it's interesting watching this when they supposedly didn't get along. Because, according to Bailey, Anissa wanted to be the token black person. I'm not going to go there in this video, I'm just going to behave. A bunch of the men question Jenna about why she wants to go in, and we do see Tori getting voted in. Nelson apologizes to Anissa for his actions, and he mentions that it is a free skull, since Jenna is checked out. Kayla defends her friend, where she mentions that it isn't a guarantee that Jenna will go in, and she isn't checked out. Nelson is baffled that Kayla always has something to say, and he tells her that she's the foulest woman in the house, and how she needs to get fucked in a porta potty, and how she needs to fix her relationship, where she says that she never fucked anyone in the porta potty. Kyle mentions that Nelson is digging himself for the next guy's daily, and Bear actually defends Kayla here, which I guess is nice, where Nelson doesn't care for any of that at all. Nelson and Bear continue kind of going at it after the nomination ceremony, and he calls her, i.e. Kayla, a slut, where a bunch of the other guys mention that Nelson going personal is not helping him, so he takes the slut comment back, right afterwards. Kayla and Bear are all good, and they are snuggling up in the room, where she realizes that she is not ready to be married to her boyfriend, though she'll get married to Sam a year and a half after this. Nany and Casey are speaking to one another, and they are getting close to one another, though Casey is in a relationship, and Nany is blushing whenever she's asked about Casey in the confessional. Swaggy is telling Bailey that she needs to keep her emotions in check and to let him do the talking, so she has to apologize to Jordan, essentially. Anissa is noticing Nany and Casey's flirting, especially with Nany being drunk, so she tries to warn Casey that she needs to save her relationship. But Casey is getting very defensive, and Nany overhears this, since Anissa needs to mind her business. Nany wants to punch Anissa and thinks that she is annoying, where Nany mentions that she's joking, though Anissa clearly knows that she isn't joking, and she calls her out about it, where she wants Nany to get out of her face. Nany then grabs Anissa after Anissa is trying to walk away, I believe, and Anissa tells Nany to take the trash factor down. This continues back into the house where Nany is eating her noodles, where Jenna mentions that people were talking about her flirting with Casey. So she is snapping on Jenna, where Jenna really wasn't doing anything. So those two are arguing a bit, and Anissa mentions that she didn't put hands on Nany, so Nany shouldn't have touched her. We then have Nany snapping at Anissa, where she calls her corny, old, and making fun of her for being a stripper, though Anissa claims that it is incorrect since she isn't a stripper. And Nany attempts to throw a cup of noodles on Anissa, but it doesn't works if she has poor landing. Honestly, Nani's just 100% wrong and foul in the situation. There's really no way around it. And the fact that she got upset at the reunion about it really just says it all. Corey is cheering Anissa up, which shows how the interactions developed over the years in a positive way, especially with how rocky they were on Battle of the Bloodlines. Nelson apologizes to Kayla, and she really doesn't believe it. Nani and Anissa speak, where she's crying as she does apologize, where Anissa easily forgives her, where there's commentary about Nani not handling power well, and Anissa talks about feeling out of grasp because she is older and she's been on the show for the longest out of everyone. Tula, Kayla, and Dee are nominated by the Tribunal, and Tula is tired of being nominated over and over again, but she's crying to Corey about it. Jenna speaks to Zach, where he rants about him catching her cheating on him, and he's ranting about her still being in the house, meaning that he wanted her to leave already, where he yells that he has a house instead of they have a house, where she was talking about them wanting to buy a house together, and he yells that if she does not come home now, all of her stuff will be out in a box, despite them planning on getting engaged this year. Zach rambles through all of her deleted Snapchats and Instagram, and he really managed to look like an ass on a season he wasn't even on. I don't know why. You know the pressures of being on the show and what all that entails. And you know that your partner also knows what that feels like. So you're at home, your partner's in the stressful environment, you knowing what it goes through, and you're just putting even more pressure on her in that toxic ass environment where it really just wasn't necessary. And this is the last impression that people have on Zach just from watching the show. Jordan is plotting about getting Tori to the final, and she feels a lot of pressure, where she would prefer to be an underdog where she wants to buy a house with Jordan. Dee is ranting to Wes about how she's pissed off about Jordan nominating her, since she did not give Tori the option when she's in the tribunal, where Wes says that Tula will get sent in/demolished in the elimination, or Jenna will go home. So they're all just assuming that Tori's going to win here. Jenna does decide to nominate herself, but she doesn't want to quit, and the elimination is Dust to Dust, where they have to carry and smash bricks through a crate and wheel the crumbled bricks to a container. Jordan is yelling at Tori through the elimination, which really just isn't helping, but Jenna does end up beating Tori. Honestly, I don't have a whole lot to say about Tori this season, though clearly losing to a chick that Jenna is not a good look. There's so much focus from Jordan to give her a win, and losing that support that they got from last season made her more entitled, which we saw with the Dee situation. It really is shocking that she and Jordan are breaking up by the time next season takes place, but her trajectory from a fan point of view doesn't ever increase, and she has yet another poor season right after this. Jordan is really sad that Tori is gone and isn't handling it well. He doesn't care about not holding back now, and he wants to get that skull, while Kyle doesn't want to go in yet, since he knows that there'll be many more chances to get a skull, since it's still pretty early on in the season. And here's the thing when it comes to twists like this. They know that the season is going to last for like 2 months or a month and a half. When's the starting date and when's the end date? So based on the start and the end date and when these elimination rounds are happening, you can kind of surmise when certain things are or aren't going to happen. So the Holy Trinity is definitely happy with the elimination result, and we see Wes and Dee cackling about Jordan being alone and miserable, so they are plotting his demise. Kayla and Bear are making out publicly out in the open, so they are now more attached to one another more than ever. Nelson is very vague in his strategic conversations, and his mouth pisses people off, where Kayla is plotting his downfall, where we get a flashback of them arguing during Invasion, which was her very first season, so they've always kind of had this relationship. And we kind of see why Nelson's at the bottom of the house at this point. The daily is decontamination, where they have to go through the form to see the foam, to see the sequential order of the colored lights and then place puzzle pieces in the order. TJ announces that it is a double elimination for the guys, so 2 more people will get their skulls and 2 guys will get booted. I actually do really enjoy this daily with all the foaminess, and it's brighter compared to all the other challenges in the seasons, and it really does test your memorization, where Anissa, Bear, Kayla, and Nani are working together to get Kayla into the tribunal, where Anissa does end up regretting this. Maddie and Wes are in the tribunal, and they choose Bananas to join them. Swaggy was actually expecting to be chosen due to the pregame alliance, but that didn't work out here. Nani does a horrible campaign to save her Wait, no. Nelson does a horrible campaign to save himself from getting nominated, but Kayla doesn't give a single shit about anything he has to say, which is fair on her part. We get to the nominations where Fessel and Nelson are nominated, and Nelson is called out for making the same promise and deal to every single person in the house, and especially with the men, mentioning that he would protect all of them individually, where he and Jordan are arguing about the semantics about Nelson's promises and Nelson wanting to go to the end with people. And apparently Nelson did the same thing with the women as well. Nelson calls Kyle a piece of shit about throwing him under the bus, while Nelson sees Kyle as a pussy, and they are arguing at the club where Kyle pushes Nelson's arm off him and they are separated, where Josh is playing a good security guard actually. Melissa defends Kyle and Nelson calls Kyle out for being a pussy yet again, and it's pathetic that a woman has to defend him. And Melissa is arguing that Nelson shouldn't be fighting with a woman. They go back home and Tula is talking about being a savage and she's joking around as she is taking stuff off. It seems like she snapped for some reason where she apparently thought someone wanted to fight her. She jumps off the bed and she ends up injuring her foot where it starts to bleed and she's going to need to get cotton pads. She's freaking out when she's been told that she has to go to the hospital, where she's apparently given 3 stitches and has to rest now. The Tribunal nominates Jordan, Bear, Kyle, and Corey, where Bear and Jordan are chosen. Bananas and West choose Jordan specifically, seeing it as a pole wrestle. Fessel ends up accidentally injuring Jordan during the first round, and it's no contest during the second round, where Fessel easily beats Jordan. We have a very teary-eyed confession of Jordan talking about how people with disabilities need to not let it get to them, and he's always had something to prove his entire life, and to just do it and go after it. And it's a really nice, sincere message and moment for him, where I don't feel like we've ever seen Jordan this vulnerable before. Or since, really. Before the second elimination takes place, Swaggy mentions to Josh that Wes was saying all day that Bear and Jordan were going to go in, so Bear is blindsided and Josh is shocked that this was the plan all along. And then he moves from Swaggy to rent how he's going to send in Swaggy and Wes in the next round. And it's essentially the same thing he did probably last season. He's going to do it here. And I don't know why Josh gives so much of a fuck about this. Anyways, we do have Nelson easily beating Bear here as well, with Corey being happy that both Nelson and Fessel get their skulls. And it's kind of like Fessel replaced Hunter in the Young Bucks Alliance, though they never call it that, but it's essentially the same function. I am really glad that this is the last of Bear, and I didn't care about him actively going after Kayla and bragging about her boyfriend getting cheated on while he also had a girlfriend. I think he's worse on his season because, one, he didn't have any of the competitive edge and drive that he did on his last 2 seasons, which made him a bit more interesting, and the fire hydrant thing was just really dumb. Of course, with the alleged minor thing and the revenge corn on Georgia, as well as the woke era, caused him to be done for good on the show, where he did get arrested like a year or 2 after this due to his antics, and he's persona non grata, and it was very high profile in the UK with what he did. So you can tell that Jordan really sees this as a job more than anything else and doesn't care for any other element, since he was so focused on getting Tori a skull and pushing her to win, where he pissed off a lot of people, though his feud with West was pretty fun. Seeing him booted early is a rarity, but it also showed that his disability does come into play at times, but we know that he would be on a slight break due to the culture at the time, where some of his real-world racism and just violent acts went viral online, and people were calling it out because they banned D a few episodes after this, but they let this fly. And Jordan was probably bound for a break anyways. But he'll be off for a few seasons, especially with him and Tori breaking up soon after this. But we all know that he would return on All Stars 3 to be rebranded with Naya. And I'll talk more about that when I eventually get to All Stars 3. Wes and Bananas are thrilled with their move being successful. Fessel and Nelson are glad that they both have their skulls, where Corey wants to now get his, and it's clear that they're the new Young Bucks, like I mentioned earlier. Kayla is pissed off and sad about Bear being gone, and she needs to get a star now, where she's annoyed that it was a blindside, which Josh is also annoyed with, where Nanny joins the conversation where they realize that Swaggy and Bailey are working with Wes, and Josh feels betrayed by the two of them, and I don't know why, since as long as they're not targeting him, he really shouldn't care. but I feel like a part of this is because he wanted a storyline as well. Swaggy, Bailey, and Wes are talking where Josh tells the woman about the situation, and they know that it got back to them. So the three of them are talking about how paranoid Josh is, where the married couple wants to work with the both of them, but the relationship with Wes needs to be kept on the down low. Josh enters and leaves the room awkwardly, and they're clearly building up to something. Casey and Anissa wants to get their stars, and Dee is speaking to Rogan about how Jenny is her biggest threat, so she wants Jenny gone now, which is rubbing Rogan the wrong way, seeing how untrustworthy Dee is. Since if she can turn on and dump Jenny so quickly, she could do the same thing to him, but clearly she wasn't intending on doing that to him. Tula enters the daily with crutches, and she is sent home due to being medically unable to continue. I was shocked when she came back for 35 when it happened in real time, and we saw a bit more of her personality, but I still struggled with how she fit on the show. We didn't really see her compete or strategize much, and I know she benefited from one or two people rejecting or dropping out of the season. Obviously, she would be more notable on future seasons, but she's relatively harmless this season. Tunnel Rats is the daily where they're in teams of 4 to 5 and they have to get 5 pieces from the tunnel so they can solve the puzzle, and TJ announces that it is a double female elimination round. I don't care too much for the daily at all, but we see Team 3 winning the daily, which has Bailey, Nani, Dee, Corey, and Wes in it, and they're all in the tribunal. Dee wants to get rid of Jenny, but wants to keep her hands clean, so she wants to manipulate others into doing it, and this isn't really a good idea since she herself really isn't that liked. Janet calls Zach and he does not answer. Janet is complaining to Nanny about how she understands why Zach doesn't want to answer, which I don't get why, especially if she did nothing wrong. And Nanny essentially knows that Jenna wants to go home, despite having a skull already. Casey campaigns to get voted in at the nomination ceremony, and everyone allows it, where Anissa is also nominated, which is what Anissa wanted. Nanny, Bailey, and Dee are wondering about who is going to go against Casey and Anissa, and they're all talking about how they don't want to see Jenny in a final, and the two of them don't want to go in at this point either, where Nanny peeps what Dee is essentially trying to get across when it comes to Jenny. Rogan tells Jenny about Dee wanting to target her, and Rogan is doing this so Dee can be a target, since he feels handicapped by her and he clearly values Jenny over her. A part of me also thinks that one of the reasons why he did this was for storyline purposes, and he feels like Dee is smothering his potential on the show. Banana calls Jenna out about wanting to leave despite already being eligible for a final, and Jenna mentions that she doesn't want to go home, but he's calling her out about putting it out in the atmosphere, which is clearly true since the entire house has known about this forever up until this point. Casey and Nanny are vibing, and Jenny is coming to a bunch of guys about Dee, where she's complaining about it and mentions that if she screws her over, she will target Dee. And she notices Dee's body language towards her being very negative. We have Josh complaining about fake people as Ricky is agreeing with him about it. Josh then decides to snap at him for them being on different sides supposedly, and Josh rants about how he can say whatever he wants, whereas Swaggy's trying to calm him down. Swaggy then mentions that Josh is drinking and is getting too riled up, where Josh is wondering why Swaggy is sitting next to him. It's all way too much. Bailey ends up joining the conversation because she sees where things are going. Swaggy calls him a pussy, and Josh throws a drink at him like he's a bad guy, and it's just so effing pathetic. Where Swaggy is obviously very pissed off, rightfully so. Bailey is then also pissed off at Josh and doesn't understand why he's doing what he's doing. Swaggy is pissed off that Josh not only threw a drink, but then hid behind security, which would be his go-to. Then Josh is jumping on the bar table, acting like the complete clown that he is. All of this was just completely unwarranted. Nani is overprotecting Jenna at this point, where Jenna, Kayla, who wants to go in at this point, Melissa, and Jenny are nominated by the tribunal, where Melissa doesn't want to go in yet. Jenny makes a campaign about how she's probably going to go in, but she doesn't really make a good deal with the tribunal, as politics isn't her strongest suit, which I'm realizing now that 40 is taking place in real time. But she mentions that she will help them out about getting them their skulls, and she's rambling on and on, which tires them out, which would be a common theme with her this season. So we have Kayla facing Casey and Jenna facing Anissa in the elimination, where they are both or all playing bombs away, where they need to move 100 bomb balls out of the bin, and then they will detonate a smoke bomb. This elimination wasn't the strongest, but Casey beats Kayla, which Bailey is happy about, and Anissa beats Jenna. Maddie is realizing that is waiting too long to gift her skull, and she should have went in this time. So both of them had relationship issues. It was nice to see Kayla after getting kicked off 3 seasons ago, where it really feels like the last we saw of her was really on vendettas. Her cheating on Bear was a gross storyline, and she got into a decent amount of drama with Nelson, but it was clear that she was starting to get over the show by this point, though she did a few more after this. I am more than fine with this being Jenna's last season, as I'm recording this. It is ridiculous that despite the element of them not competing against one another, which is what they decided after War of the Worlds 1, Zach made her experience very miserable, and while she did win the elimination, the show clearly doesn't do them any good, and she was still debating about quitting. She claims that she hasn't retired yet, but realistically, it has been 5 years and she plans to have more kids, so it's unlikely that she'll be back at this point, whether it's on the flagship or at all. Nany is kind of happy that Jenna is home since she didn't want to be there, and Nany can focus without the drama of Kayla and Jenna. And Nany was throwing a lot of shade towards Jenna throughout the last few episodes, so I guess it's clear that she's happy. Josh calls his family and he wants to go give back to them since he provided so much for them in his life. So I wonder what happened to his Big Brother money, since he always mentions how his family needs the money in this season and future seasons. Corey speaks to his pregnant girlfriend Taylor, who looks like she's in her second trimester, and Corey needs to get money for all of his kids. Though I'm pretty sure he was on Team Mom by this point in time, so he was already getting paid a lot more than most challengers. The cast asks who they want to go in, or who wants to go in, which just shows how trite the strategy was in this season. And we have Corey and Josh admitting that they want to go in, but we also have a montage of Johnny and Wes working together throughout the season. But they both need their skulls, which, I wonder what's going to happen. The daily is thrown off where they were hanging onto a missile where they will answer trivia where if they answer the question right, they can strike someone's missile, and if they get the answer wrong, their missile will be struck. It's a fun enough daily, but there's many more trivia challenges that they've done in the past and in the future that is more memorable. Dee wins out of the women, and Wes wins out of the men, where they choose Rogan to be in the tribunal. Bananas campaigns to get voted into the tribunal since there'll be a few more men's tribunal eliminations left, and he doesn't want to wait. Josh also campaigns about how he wants to go in, and Corey is essentially doing the same thing. Bananas gets his wish with being voted into elimination, but he doesn't think Wes will choose to face him. Wes is told by Nelson and Corey that his name was put on the board with Bananas, kind of like a joke, and Wes is actually debating about whether he should go against Bananas. Bananas does tell Wes that he should not volunteer to go into elimination, where Wes mentions that this might be the last guy's elimination, where just looking at the amount of weeks of filming left, he should have realized that this was never going to be the last guy's elimination. Bananas mentions that he wants to run a final with Wes, while Wes thinks that he will have a better chance against the newer players. Wes, Rogan, and Dee are in the tribunal where they want to nominate Corey and Swaggy, and Rogan still doesn't like Kyle, so nominating him makes sense. Kyle does not want to go into elimination this time, and we see him talk to Swaggy about preferring Bananas over Wes because the latter is more sneaky and the former is more transparent with what he wants and doesn't want, where he doesn't want to be sent into elimination against his good ally and friend Bananas. Corey also wants to go into elimination, and Wes is thinking about nominating himself, but if he changes his mind, it'll either be Swaggy or Corey. Wes decides to go in against Bananas, and I think a large part of the reason why Wes did it here is because it would make for a better storyline for him. And the elimination is Charge the Wall, where they have to smash a box that's on a wall to grab 3 lights, and the first one to power it will win the elimination. This elimination is kind of meh, and it's kind of like the wall climbing one from Free Agents, but a lot less interesting. But Bananas beats Wes here, and they have an emotional hug and farewell. I didn't care how emphasize the West and Banana's allegiance/friendship was, since I knew they were phoning it in during the last few seasons anyways, but I did find his conflict with Jordan to be pretty interesting and intense, where we saw it a bit on Battle of the Exes too. Outside of that, he really wasn't that interesting this time around, and his time on the flagship is coming to a quick close, though him watching Dee becoming more like him was something to watch, and his allegiance with Swaggy and Bailey. Okay, so I kind of have to explain the context for why the episode was edited to be like what it is on the actual broadcast version, and why they edited the rest of the season the way they did, and why the challenge arguably changed for good. So from my recollection, Dee and Swaggy and Bailey were going back and forth on social media over petty stuff, where Swaggy apparently called her out for wanting to play up their social media banter for a storyline next season. She was apparently at Wes's house with Nehemiah and a few other people. They're doing some project, and she was supposedly very high on drugs. Someone, like a random fan on social media, wanted her to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement or something along the lines of that, and she said, "People die every day." A very callous statement. People then mention, "Oh, why don't you care about black people, blah, 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 blah." And then Dee says that, "Of course I like black people. I lost my virginity to a black man." Very tasteless comment. Then I believe Big T made some commentary about how she didn't like Dee in the house. She made it uncomfortable, and everything just blew up. All of this happened on social media, months after the season even filmed. None of this had any involvement when it comes to the actual storyline on the actual show. MTV, this happened like 2 days before this episode was going to air. MTV then decided to completely edit Dee out of the rest of the season, despite the fact that what she did had nothing to do with the actual season taking place. Unlike Camilla. So that ended up happening. Then they posted on their episodes how they cut ties with her, how she's banned from ever appearing on the show due to her racist comments, where, one, there's been several racist comments on the actual show where nothing was done. Even with Camilla, what she did on the actual show didn't have any sort of punishment, and she legitimately said racial slurs, where Dee didn't state any of that. She just made stupid, ignorant, and unfunny commentary on social media. And Camilla got punished due to Champs vs. Stars. It had nothing to do with Dirty 30. Leroy was the one who had to bring it up on Dirty 30 for there to be any sort of commentary there. And even with that, they're just planning on not airing the actual incident. So that's the backstory as to why the rest of the season is edited the way that it was edited. So now I'm going to go into the actual episode, but expect me to drag or go on a few rants while recovering or talking about the season from here on out, though I might just specifically stay with the episode. But I don't like remedial, performative ass bullshit like this with fake wokeism and acting like you really give a damn when your program and your show thrived on the exact opposite. Okay. So now onto the episode. Maddie wants to get her skull now, where she wants to be in the tribunal, but if not, she wants to be the house vote. And Nanny is speaking to Josh in order to get herself in, but she wants to be in the tribunal for her best case scenario. So what I am going to do with this episode is talk about the stuff that made it on Canada's episode, but not the US episode where they edited all of that stuff out, even though it was the main storyline of the episode. So don't mind me if my notes are a bit all over the place, because I had to go on Reddit where they had the clips that were on the Canada version that aren't on any of the online versions or streaming versions. We do see Rogan and Dee cuddling on the couch, where she is sad about Wes going home, but Rogan wants to send Dee home, since he doesn't trust her, despite her being his closest ally, and really not giving him any reason to distrust her, solely based off the two of them. And we have a montage of Dee's untrustworthiness throughout the season. We also see Melissa and Dee talking where Dee doesn't know how her relationship is with Rogan, and she wants to have sex with him, despite the two of them agreeing to be friends. We do learn that Dee and Melissa are friends from the season, conveniently, and a pool party is taking place with Bananas, Rogan, and Cal having fun, and this leads to a bunch of pranks. We then move on to Dee and Rogan getting ready to shower, and the two of them head to the washroom to have sex in the showers, where Anissa saw and heard them having sex, and she makes fun of it for being a very quick fuck, as you just heard this, and then it stopped. I did find her commentary about this to be pretty funny. Bananas is talking to Jenny about how he cannot stand Dee and how he cannot see how Jenny is pretending to be friends with her. And Bananas is not over Dee campaigning against him early on in the season. So he wants the entire house to get her gone, and Jenny mentions that Rogan was the one who told her about the plan to target her, i.e. Jenny. The daily is flagged down where two people are hanging on a large military truck where they have to grab flags from the boxes, and the most flags of a certain color ends up winning. What they edited out of the episode was Dee actively sabotaging Bailey as they were together in the challenge, since the plan was to have Melissa win the daily to go into the tribunal, and Bailey is really pissed off because Dee just got physical with her and she doesn't see the show as fun, since she wants to win on her first time so she will never have to come back. Which I guess explains Bailey's mentality when it comes to the show and why she only did the season. I actually do like the daily, and it was a fun watch. A bunch of people are DQ'd for helping one another, but Josh and Melissa win the daily, and they choose Bananas to join them in the tribunal. Maddie mentions that she wants to go in, and Melissa is picking at Kat because she was thinking about going in, where she wants to go in even if it's against Maddie. The nomination ceremony takes place where Maddie is easily nominated since she feels like it is her time, and she doesn't want to wait around anymore. The cast goes to the club, and Melissa mentions to Bananas and Josh that she should send Bailey in if Melissa doesn't want to go in, and Nany is stressing about being purged without getting a skull later on in the season, in that scenario. The tribunal meets up, and we have Bailey, Nany, and Dee nominated, where Dee is furious, where everyone else is happy with their nominations. Dee calls out Bananas for being the one to put her in, and she's mad at Josh, where he mentions that she is a shady player. She sees this as a personal nomination, where she could have nominated him in the past. Melissa tells them to nominate Bailey instead of Dee, since it will screw her up otherwise in the game, though the two of them are planning on blindsiding Melissa and Dee. Josh and Dee continue to go back and forth after the tribunal, where she could have nominated him last week, and Josh mentions that they had reason to send her in, but it seems like he is somewhat changing his mind, but he does eventually realize that she is manipulating him. Josh ends up crying with shocker! And Josh is... Who's Josh consoling? I don't even remember. Oh, I think Kyle is consoling Josh, if I'm remembering this correctly, where he mentions that they fucked them both over last season, and Josh doesn't want to be filmed crying this season, though he's done that 100 times, not only on this show, but on Big Brother. And Kyle mentions that Dee isn't a friend. Melissa immediately sees the elimination and doesn't want to do it, where Josh and Bananas vote in Dee, despite Melissa voting in Bailey. Bananas throws Rogan under the bus, asking him to give him permission to nominate Dee. Honestly, this was pretty savage of Bananas to do. And Rogan does give Bananas permission, where he cannot even look at her in the eyes. Essentially, Bananas did this not only just for TV, but to make sure that everyone knows that Rogan slapped Dee in the back. So obviously Dee feels rightfully backstabbed, even from a friendship point of view. Melissa snaps at the two of them, and the elimination is tunnel vision, where both of them will be on one side of a tunnel, which they each have their own tunnel, where it will close, where they have to dig from one end to another. I really do like this elimination, and we do see Dee pulling it out over Maddie, and Dee is reveling in the fact that she's going to cause havoc, where she tells people to fuck off, though we unfortunately never see this, and we only see a brief clip in the Canadian preview where she throws a drink or a cup or something at Rogan. But we never see it in the actual episode. Honestly, Maddie didn't do much during the season. She did have that fight with Ashley early on, which is a good one, but she intentionally played under the radar, and it definitely showed in her edit, before she threw herself in. Her being a bit boring this season isn't the reason why she never came back, but pleading guilty to either her third or fourth DUI, and MTV knew that she was too much of a liability to bring back, is why she never came back. So I remember people were hoping that she was just going to be edited out of that episode, but no, they edited her out of the entire rest of the season, where because of them being faux performative, we don't get to see the aftermath of Rogan and Dee going at it after that huge blindside last episode, and we don't see the conflict between her and Jenny, which would eventually lead up to them going against one another in the final women's elimination. But we do see Melissa snapping at Josh and Bananas for lying to her, where all of them mention that Dee learned all of her tricks from Wes, and she screwed over Bananas, Josh, and Kyle last season, but Melissa really just doesn't care. Swaggy and Bailey feel good about never being targeted this season and feel very confident, where Fussell talks about how Swaggy can't find his place since the ego from Big Brother is not there, and Swaggy knows that he needs to throw himself in via the tribunal, since he doesn't have many friends in the season. I find it interesting because I remember Fussell, Swaggy, and Bailey had some huge fallout due to that basketball event that Swaggy and Fussell planned, and they made up this season because they both knew that they were going to be on here. So I'm guessing that's why Fussell is somewhat throwing some shade, though they made up. Anyways, Kyle, Corey, Swaggy, and Josh are the only other men who don't have their skull, so it's clear that the next two rounds will consist of a combination of those four going at it, and Kyle wants to help his parents retire. Josh and Fussell talk about how all the 5 Big Brother people stuck together and all of them have different allegiances that worked out in their favor. They aren't even the first Big Brother alliance, since there's clearly one on Final Reckoning and War of the Worlds, but I guess this one will be more important since it lasts longer and many more seasons, and Fussell wants to help all of his friends, i.e. Corey, Josh, and Swaggy, get to their skulls. Corey speaks to Cheyenne and Ryder, where his daughter is very pissed off since she misses him, and Corey ends up crying to Nelson since he feels like he doesn't want to be like his father who abandoned him in his life, so he wants to be an active father. The daily is Thanks a Lot, where it's in teams of 3, and they have to bring stuff from the junkyard to put into the bin, where the 2 bins with the heaviest bins will compete in part 2, where they have to run to pull heavy stuff. It's a pretty decent daily, where we see Corey injure his ankle in the daily. Bailey, Dee, and Fussell end up winning the daily, and a lot of people are making fun of Anissa's performance here. Kyle and Corey are campaigning to be the house vote, and Josh is somewhat doing the same thing, and Fussell calls Josh out for wanting to go in, but then backing out whenever it is close to the actual elimination, and the two are somewhat arguing about this. Corey is annoyed that Jenny supported Kyle, essentially breaking her word to Corey, though Kyle is her friend, so it makes sense in my opinion. Corey gets nominated, and Melissa calls out Josh in the ceremony where he isn't loyal and she is over it, and she makes fun of his voice because he doesn't have his own opinion and it's a snake, where he mentions that Dee sent him in twice and they both do the snake movement. Both of them are yelling at one another, and she stands on the table to yell at him, and it's clear that she is pregnant here. He calls her foul, and the house shuts this down. What they didn't show, and they explained during the behind the scenes thing, is that Josh and Melissa kind of had a flirtment and a romance that ended pretty early on, so I'm wondering if some of the tension there had to do with this. Kyle is annoyed that Corey was voted in, and he wants the house to support them next week, where he is annoyed with Anissa, especially since she not only did she blow the challenge for them, but she didn't vote for him to go in. Nanny and Casey are grateful for one another in the season, and it's clear that feelings are growing there, where Nanny calls her the perfect person. Bailey talks about how Nanny and Casey do everything together, and she notices that feelings are growing between them, so Anissa was right from earlier on in the season. But Casey has a girlfriend. Swaggy seems kind of down, and he isn't sure about going into elimination. Josh, Kyle, and Swaggy are nominated by the tribunal, and Swaggy is sent into elimination with Corey. The elimination is launch button, where they have to swing from a wall to knock out a button, which will take out a light from the top. Ultimately, Corey does end up beating Swaggy. Bailey is disappointed since she was the one that was supposed to go home to prop him up, but she's left by herself, and she's pretty much stating that she did the show solely for Swaggy and to prop him up. I don't think Swaggy was a dud on the season, but he wasn't one of the big standouts either. He did get into that tiff with Josh, and apparently had an unseen tiff with Nelson, but he was mainly just associated with Bailey and Wes throughout the season, though he did play a part in the D thing on social media. He did get into a few tribunals, though some of them was because he was chosen, but he made the right choice in retiring from reality TV here, and he kept up his promise. Bailey realizes that she's going to struggle doing this without her husband, and Jenny is worried about getting thrown in again. Melissa and Josh talk about how there's going to be one more girls' elimination left, so Melissa knows that she, Nanny, and Bailey will be campaigning to go into elimination. And Nanny mentions that she will turn this place upside down if she gets purged for not getting a skull. Corey is fine that he joined Nelson and Fessel in being in the Red Skull gang, and the three of them wants to go into the final together. Bailey is getting comforted about Swaggy getting a chance to get his skull, and they all feel like he was kind of checked out anyways. We see Nanny and Casey fooling around and tickling one another, where she mentions that Casey has all the qualities that she wants in a soulmate, and the two of them are cuddling and playing around with one another, where they see one another as each other's comfort space. Corey is talking about people talking about Casey and Nanny hooking up, and Bailey knows this as well, since pretty much something similar happened with Casey and herself. And she is worried about Nanny and Casey due to Casey having a girlfriend. Anissa spoke to Casey about this, where she speaks to her about it, which she mentioned several episodes ago. And she needs to be careful with her girlfriend, where Casey mentions that nothing is happening between herself and Nanny. Bailey also speaks to Casey about it, and they talk about how Casey flirted with Bailey on Big Brother, where Bailey speaks to Jenny about how if it wasn't Swaggy being there, she would have went with Casey. As someone who watched the feed and remembered some of the conversations, she's definitely correct about this. Bailey sees Nanny as a better friend than Bailey, though Casey never gives an actual answer towards this, and Bailey notices that Casey is somewhat distancing herself. Casey admits that Nanny kisses her on the cheek at night, and all the guys are getting hype about this, since they see this as confirmation in their eyes. The daily is plugged in, where they are playing in 2 teams of 7, where they are they are surrounded by a bunch of black cars, where a red car is in the middle, and they have to push the red car out of the square and to finish the line. But they have to do this by removing or moving the black cars. People are over Jenny's mouth despite her having the correct answer, and we do have Team 1 winning, where the daily is decent enough, but not the best in my opinion. I remember something similar in one of the Era 1 challenges, if I'm remembering it correctly. We have Casey in a precarious situation where both Bailey and Nanny wants to go in and are expecting her to help them, and Nanny wants to go against Melissa since she feels more comfortable beating Melissa than Bailey, and they blame Bailey for being on her own with Swaggy, which is why she's by herself. Though many people online mention that they actually did like Bailey, so this seemed kind of like a false narrative. Bailey already knows what is going to happen and what Casey is going to do, so she's kind of just isolating herself, and Bailey mentions that it isn't her versus Nanny, but Casey's actively choosing Melissa over her because that's what Nanny wants. So she's choosing a stranger of a friend she just met over someone she knew for a year. Bailey thought that they were closer, despite knowing one another for a year, where she just met Nanny, and Casey claims that they are close, where Bailey says that she clearly doesn't care, where she mentions that Swaggy and Bailey isolated themselves, where Bailey mentioned several times that she wants Casey to leave her alone, but Casey just doesn't. Casey is the deciding vote to send in Melissa over Bailey, despite Big Brother agreeing to work together from the beginning, since she feels like Bailey cannot be trusted game-wise. There has been no reason or rationale for this in either season, and it's kind of just classic Casey gaslighting, which we will somewhat see in future seasons. Nelson is annoyed that Bailey really didn't fight for herself, and we do see and hear Bailey crying, where she's panicking to a producer, and that she does not want the cameras following her. She explained on the behind the scenes thing that the real reason why she had this panic attack was because she was suffocating due to the lack of oxygen in the house. So I did mention on the Big Brother 20 and Big Brother 22 reviews, but Bailey is way too trusting and almost always bites her in the butt. Cal and Nelson check on her as she's laying in her bed, where they don't want her to get checked out. Everyone goes to the club, and Bananas asks Bailey why she didn't do anything in the nomination ceremony, where she says that she only cries or gets angry in situations like this, where Bailey mentions that she will never speak to Casey again after this. Bananas mentioned that Bailey and Casey had a thing on their Big Brother season, and Bailey said that they slept together. Okay. Anyone who watches Big Brother knows that the house guests share beds all the time because there are certain beds that they aren't allowed to go on, and sometimes there aren't enough beds anyways. So that's essentially what's happened here. And this is what I knew Bailey was referencing. We also have Bailey mentioning that she's petty enough to tell Casey's girlfriend about what Casey is doing with Nanny. Dee, Bailey, and Casey are nominated, and Banana stirs the pot by telling Casey what Bananas said, where Casey mentioned that Bailey lies. Bailey was too hurt to speak yesterday, but she's ready to speak now, and she mentioned that Nanny got in the way of the friendship, and Nanny doesn't want that put on her. So they are arguing, and Bailey is absolutely correct about how Casey feels about Nanny. And she also mentioned them sleeping together on a bed in the Big Brother house to the tribunal, where they of course misconstrued this. Jenny cheers up Bailey, who is rambling about Swaggy telling Bailey from the beginning that Casey is fake and is not to be trusted. Nanny tells Casey what happened in the interrogation, and Casey decides to confront Bailey for saying that they slept together, where she asks Bailey why she lies so much. Bailey yells that she's not going to be disrespected, and how she has done nothing to Casey and she needs to leave, where Casey somewhat yells in a monotone tone that she needs to control her emotions. Bailey and Nanny pass one another, where the former calls the latter a lying asshole, which causes Nanny to follow and confront Bailey in the same bedroom. Since Bailey is alone and scared, that's what Nanny is claiming she is. Casey yells that they were just friends on Big Brother, and Bailey retorts that she and Nanny are just friends, where Casey wants to cuddle with her. Bailey mentions that Casey told her that she's her type separate times. I do remember some of these conversations happening in the house, and Bailey wants her to leave, and she only has tears or yells. This is so stupid, but Bailey does feel used. Fessel is claiming that Bailey misled this, and she's misinterpreting it, but he really didn't know a lot of what was happening in the actual house when he was in the conversations, but even more so when he wasn't in the conversations, where he's infamously known for saying, who flipped like 1,000 times on the season. Nanny is not very confident in going into the elimination, and Bananas is trying to cheer her up. Nanny does decide to step into the elimination as she feels confident, where she is facing Melissa in Off With Your Head, where they have 5 skulls on their body and they have to snatch it off their opponent. We've seen this elimination a few times, specifically on Dirty 30. It's a pretty good scrappy elimination, and Melissa beats Nanny. We did see Nanny continue her messiness this season, where she snapped at Anissa for calling her out on Casey, or for Casey. She even kind of threw Jenna under the bus when it comes to this, and then she had that blowout with Bailey throughout the season. And like I mentioned, she's kind of throwing Kayla and especially Jenna under the bus a lot here. The cast was absolutely right about her and Casey, where they got together like a year after this, and they're currently engaged as I'm speaking. So where there's smoke, there's fire. And I really just didn't like Nanny's entitled attitude this season, which carried over from last season. Kyle and Josh really want their skulls, and Bailey knows that she needs to get a skull, though she has had 4 chances to throw herself in. The guys are talking about how if there's another elimination, a wet skull woman has to be thrown in no matter what, and Kyle mentions that he doesn't want to run a final with Anissa, and Josh claims that she is the biggest dead weight. And what the fuck is he, mister? I haven't ever been to a final up until this season, and up until I'm recording this 5 years after the season. Anyways, Johnny agrees with the sentiment. All of them talk about how she's a good friend, and she used to be a good competitor as she was the elimination queen, but her best days are behind her and she makes it far because of her veteran status. Anissa speaks to her mother, and she's tired of being cut right before the final several times, though she knows that she isn't in the best shape. Corey and Fessel are talking about if he spoke to Haley. Corey asks Fessel if he spoke to Haley. They don't say her name, but we all know who Fessel's girlfriend at this point is. And Fessel mentions that she was worried because there are other hot girls there. Based on how he acted next season, she had every right to be worried. We get some history about his football career ending early, where his injury ruined his career, and it's clear to me that he benefited the most screen time-wise from the deletion taking place. He is talking about being Middle Eastern and Islam. Okay, I have to interrupt here. He is half Pakistani. Pakistan is not in the Middle East, and it has never been a part of the Middle East. It is in South Asia and was a part of India 2 generations before him. And his white mother is not Middle Eastern. So I just had to get that in. But he talks about 9/11 and people making fun of them wherever they went. And we all know that he would go by his real name on Ride or Dies. And he has a sport mentality of the show. But him and Corey are really, 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 really close. Remember this for when we get to later on in the episode, because there's a reason why they're showing this. The daily is running out of time where they have to get a bunch of heavy material to put in their opponent's bucket, and TJ announces that one man and one woman will go home. Nelson, Fessel, and Curry decide to work together in this challenge. The second part of the challenge is that they have to hold their barrel, and whomever lasts the longest will win. Fessel makes a deal with Josh and Corey so that they can drop so he can be in the tribunal, and Josh is mad because they both promised to send him into the tribunal, where Josh dropped out before the other two, and he made that agreement before that. Fessel and Jenny get into the tribunal, and Jenny wants to get either Kyle or Josh in the tribunal since they don't have their skull, but Fessel reminds him or her that they both promised Corey something, but she mentions that Corey isn't even a target. She chooses Josh, and Corey reminds her that she screwed him over twice. He is also pissed at Fessel since the latter should have fought harder for him, and they have a very tense conversation that it's really pointless. Obviously, Kyle is nominated, and so is Bailey out of the women. Melissa is campaigning to Fessel to not be thrown in, and he tells her that most of the guys do not want to run a final with Anissa, so Melissa has no worries. And we see Nelson telling Anissa that most of the guys want her out due to the final, and she states that it is an individual season, not a paired season, and he's giving her point about what she needs to do to save herself. Corey is whining about having a win taken from him, and Anissa is calming him down, where he also tells her to talk to Jenny to save herself, and we see that take place. The tribunal nominates Rogan, Nelson, Anissa, and Melissa, and Anissa mentions that no one might not even be paired up at any point in the final, so worrying about the final and being paired up with her is really pointless. And people who are the fittest people ever have died in finals, and she feels like she's never given a chance in the final. I do think she makes a lot of good points here, though I still don't really think what the others have stated is incorrect. Corey is still whining over the daily, and I'm more than over hearing about it. Josh nominates himself for elimination, and the tribunal chooses Anissa to go into elimination. Knots of War is the elimination where it is essentially the not elimination, but it's done in a car. Bailey beats Anissa, and Kyle beats Josh. Everyone is expecting for TJ to say that they are all in the final, since they all have the stars, but he doesn't mention it, so clearly there's going to be another elimination at least. So Anissa comes back after an almost 3-year hiatus and being off for 4 seasons, and you can definitely tell that she's not as fit as she used to be. She did get into some drama with Nanny and even Nelson, and I did think she was a bit funny this season, but her not making it to a final and the men seeing her as a liability started being a part of her edit here, and a lot of this will be carried on to next season. Josh was still as annoying, entitled, and delusional as ever this season. It's clear that he was using Wes as a storyline, which was annoying as hell, and I did not like how he handled Swanky and Bailey at all of the season for having other allies. Essentially, all of his seasons will be him getting close to the end and losing weight before the final, since he'll be saved for a late season elimination, and it all starts to blend in after a while. Everyone is now worried about what will happen, where Kyle and Bananas mentions that it is just about who makes it to the tribunal, which will determine how this next round goes. And Nelson talks about pushing as far as he can, and Corey is dreaming about being a challenge winner, and the both of them are very close to winning, and they talk about how they've both grown so much. Nelson talks about how much Corey being a family man has helped him, and how proud of him he is of Corey. It is another double elimination where a man and a woman is going home, and the daily is Crash Course, where the 10 of them will be on a barrel, and one of them will be driving through the barrels to send as many of the barrels flying the furthest and the quickest, where the man and woman who gets it will be in the tribunal. Rogan knows that he's a loner in the house, partially due to his bad gameplay, and he will probably be thrown in if he loses. It was an okay daily, where Bananas and Casey end up winning the daily. Bailey doesn't like this since Casey is still after her, but Bananas convinces her to choose Kyle to be in the tribunal, since he'll be voted in otherwise. I don't know how true that is, and Faisal won't be, since she's worried about Faisal being in danger. Faisal campaigns to the tribunal to not get thrown in, and Jenny enters the room, where there's discussion about sending in Rogan, and Jenny is campaigning to not get thrown in, and she does want to send him in, where it makes her look untrustworthy. Corey and Nelson relay all of this to Rogan, and Rogan calls her a bitch. Lovely. Rogan volunteers to go into elimination since he knows that he's getting voted in anyways, and he doesn't want to hide like he did last season, where Jenny and Dee talk about how it took them a while to get over their issues, which would have been so nice to see if the deletion didn't happen, since they're clearly building up this arc between the two of them throughout the entire season, and knowing how the elimination matchup happens, it would have been great to actually see this, but that's besides the point. And we have Rogan calling Jenny out about throwing him under the bus, where she mentions that it is true and everyone talked about it. Rogan calls her out for being a pawn and was trying to gain favor with Corey and Nelson, and Jenny does not defend herself well at all, where she is stuttering, and he doesn't appreciate it since he gave her a heads up when Dee wanted to target her. Jenny ends up getting nominated and she rants about it, where Rogan goes back and forth with her about it. Melissa realizes that she and Bailey voted for one another, and Johnny and Kyle call Melissa out for not. Sorry, they're calling her out because her burning her vote on Bailey caused for Jenny to get sent in, and neither one of the men wants her in. And protecting Dee is dumb, since Melissa did not want to choose between Jenny and Dee, but what she did kind of helped Jenny get thrown in. So Kyle mentions that Melissa essentially chose a side. Fessel is worried about Bananas breaking his word, and the tribunal nominates Dee, Bailey, Corey, and Nelson, where the tribunal wants someone to take out Rogan and Dee. Nelson makes a huge deal about sacrificing himself for Corey and his family, where they really make it a huge thing on the edit, but apparently Nelson was getting voted in anyways. So I also think this is kind of a way for Nelson to redeem himself on camera after his horrible behavior this season. Nelson and Dee are sent into elimination by the tribunal, where the elimination is hardball, where Jenny, I don't want to even say just beats Dee, she demolishes Dee, where literally Dee ended up running the other way both rounds, and it really was just no contest, and it would have been so satisfying to see the edit in its full form, only to have Dee have this humiliating loss. But anyways, Jenny specifically trained for the Hall Brawl after last season with Tori, and Rogan barely beats Nelson, where even Rogan is shocked. It is really disappointing and honestly very annoying and honestly insulting that MTV decided now to be faux woke, performative, and progressive, where they edited Dee out of like the last 3 to 4 episodes, when even Camilla's racist ass still had a few confessionals here and there when she was being edited out of 30/30, but we didn't get that with Dee at all. Obviously, what she said was a horrendous joke, and she was insensitive, but it was off the show. And so many people have said worse on the actual show and on social media, but absolutely nothing happened to them. I do think she had 3 strikes against her. 1, she's a foreign Australian, and they see foreigners as more expendable on this show. 2, she's an Asian woman, so she's not white, and just from the history of the show, they tend to be easier on white people unless they show their hand too much. And 3, she is a woman, where the show honestly has thrived on misogyny throughout so many seasons, where men get to do whatever they want, but if a woman does it, she'll be punished and lambasted. But anyway, she was doing way too much with trying to fake beefs with Swaggy for the next season and came off as unlikable. But with her supposedly doing drugs while she made that tweet, being off the show is probably the best for her, and I know she just got engaged as I'm recording this. Nelson came off horribly in the season, with the way he really only picked fights with the woman on the season, and he definitely showed some horrendous misogynistic tendencies. It was interesting seeing him and Corey get back on the show without Hunter, and the final move, while somewhat notable, was contrived as hell. I guess I forgot he and Kyle had that like random tiff, but it was such a nothing burger, and that kind of continued on Spice Lights and Allies as well. I will say that despite that, he was interesting to watch this season, even if he wasn't likable at all, but we will see how he moves in the next few seasons. Everyone is glad to officially be in the final, and Corey reads the letter that Nelson wrote for him after being eliminated. Kyle and Melissa are thankful for one another in the season. It's alleged that they were in a romance this season, and she wants to pay back her father, and Bailey thinks that Melissa is going to flop in the final, since she really didn't do well in the season, and she feels like Melissa is just doing it for bragging rights. Fessel is crying to Casey about making it to their first final as rookies, and he wants to give some money to his family, since they weren't the most well off, apparently. It is the final where $500,000 will be given to the best man and woman of the season. They have to go through 9,000 feet of elevation and walk 12 feet. Honestly, I don't know if 9,000 feet is the right number, but I really don't care to fix it right now. Anyways, they have to ski to get logs and then get some monuments, where they have to put 12 logs to light it. Fessel is initially in the lead out of the guys, and Jenny is in the lead for the women. But Koi completes the first checkpoint before Fessel. Bailey crosses over, but she feels like her knee is injured, where she doesn't want to go to the hospital at this point. Jenny and Corey are forming the final tribunal, where they have to send a man home, where two men will be in elimination. All of them have to go climb the mountain, where the rest of them will be outside for the evening, or something along the lines with that. Rogan nominates himself, though Fessa mentions that Rogan was going to be nominated anyway, since he was literally just nominated the last round, and Melissa decides to go in for the woman as well, where Jenny nominates Casey and Corey nominates Bananas. The elimination is about to start, but Melissa decides to quit, though she also knows that she has no chance here, so Casey doesn't technically have to do the elimination and is treated as a win. The two men compete in a knockout, where they have to race to the ring, the bell in the middle twice, which is... I think they thought that it would be fun watching people in winter outfits jumping in snow to do this, but it really wasn't. But we do have Bananas beating Rogan here. They all go to the compound for the night, where everyone but Bananas, Jenny, Corey, and Casey has to sleep outside. At least for some point. Or at some point. Though they all eventually go inside. Bailey is crying, where she tells TJ that she thinks she tore her ACL. So Corey mentions in his confessional that Bailey checked out of the game once she was told that they had to sleep outside. So she's out. So I might as well talk about the three of them here, since they are all booted roughly around the same time. It was nice seeing Melissa last more than a few episodes in the season for once, but I would be lying if I said she brought much to the table. She didn't compete very well, and outside of her arguments with Josh, and Nelson, she wasn't the most entertaining in the season, though she might have suffered from the edit as well. I will give her props for doing this while she was pregnant, which she didn't know about until the final, but baby daddy issues would cause her to not be on for a few years, and she may or may not have been hooking up with Cal in the season too. It was clear to me that Rogan went on with Jay and turned on D to essentially ensure storylines for himself, and I did find him to be pretty entertaining, cutthroat, and self-aware, but his attachments to D screwed him over in the edit, and his prior tweets and the faux woke culture that MTV participated in caused him to never come back, which is a shame since he offers a lot to the show, more than most of the dud newbies that they eventually cast after this. But I do think that him trying so hard to ensure a callback and ensuring storylines for himself caused him to kind of be on the outs and to make stupid game moves, especially during the second half of the season. I do think Bailey had a good rookie season, where she won quite a few tribunals and could hold her own competitively, but it's clear that she just doesn't care for reality TV games, as she initially did it for Swiggy, but that didn't go well. Of course, we had Casey gaslighting her during their fight, and she had a tiff with Nanny, but I don't think she's emotionally strong enough for the show, and reality TV in general, since she falls apart when things don't go her way, so I'm fine with her just never coming back. It is just Kyle and Fessel who are outside, where Kyle is talking too much and Fessel isn't saying anything, but they are allowed to enter the compound after 6 hours. It is the next morning, and they have to go to the trail where they go to the finish line, where Corey and Jenny have a minute head start, and then Casey and Bananas has one after that, where Jenny arrives first and Bananas arrives first out of the men, so the two of them win the season. Casey is obviously second out of the women, since there's no one else. Kyle is second for the men, Corey gets third, and Fessel gets fourth. We actually see Bananas tear up in his confessional, or his final confessional, where he didn't think that he would ever win again, and it's actually a rare, sincere moment to see from him. Fessel was pretty nondescript and boring on the season, but he was genuinely being himself, as he was an agreeable person who just wanted to compete. He won his elimination against Jordan, and he essentially joined the Young Bucks alliance. There really isn't anything else to say, but we will see a lot more of him in the future, despite his rookie season arguably being his least notable, and he metaphorically sold his soul to the devil to ensure that he'll be on the show for a while, but we'll talk more about that next season. Corey came back after being off for a few seasons and performing poorly on a few seasons before his layoff, where he seemingly got his shit together. He was playing a more low-key, agreeable game here, focusing more on being a family man, and was there to do business, though they emphasize him being a father a lot more on the season, which is something they would do in his next few seasons. He was decent in the season, and it was nice to see him, even if he wasn't really that interesting here. Casey is someone that I always struggle to have much of an opinion on, and that is no different here. I am not shocked that she did well on the show, since she has a low-key personality and can compete. Obviously, we see the start of what eventually turned into an engagement with Nani, though I saw a gross element to her during her fight with Bailey. That kind of continues on in future seasons with other people. Cal is someone that I'm starting to have less thought of in general, and I felt like this last season as well. Good for him in getting the runner-up position on the season, and I think if they showed what supposedly happened between him and Melissa, he would have been more interesting to watch. He had some decent set bites and confessionals, but there's nothing too notable about him this season. I do give Jenny props for improving on her fault and actually practicing from last season, where people who did many seasons just refused to do. She had a dominant season from a competitive point of view, and it does suck that her drama with Dee and Rogan was edited out due to what happened. I didn't like that she wasn't back for several seasons, since she didn't fit a quota, where she was an alternate for a few seasons, but she will eventually be back for 40. Honestly, I don't have much thoughts on Bananas this season, though I think a large part of that is due to me just not caring for him and Wes's interactions throughout the season, where they were cool for many seasons, but they're making it seem like a huge thing here. He got his win after making it to a final for several seasons, so the Sarah's curse did end, so at least he had that, but I think he wanted to have a break from the show, and the producers tweeted that they don't have to have him on every single season. Since it is the middle of the COVID lockdown, it was decided that the reunion would be done virtually. Of course, Bananas and Jenny talk about their wins, and Jenny looked so nice without her lip filler. And he was doubting about ever seeing a final, much less winning, after the whole Sarah stuff. Faisal feels like he redeemed himself from not doing well on Big Brother, and Bailey actually did injure her knee pretty badly. Melissa knew something was wrong while climbing up the mountain, and when she was sequestered with Bailey, she told Bailey that she might be pregnant, but when she arrived home, she was told that she was 4 months pregnant, meaning that she arrived to the season at least 2 months pregnant. Cal mentions the stupid supposed rumor about him and Melissa hooking up while on the season, to the point where people are claiming that Cal is the father, but his girlfriend laughed off those rumors. They blame Johnny for the rumor, though there's video of Cal having his hand under her clothes, and it looks like they were kissing, but I don't know if that's accurate or not. The fight with Anissa and Nany is discussed, where we see a very defensive and insufferable Nany. Casey mentions that nothing happened between herself and Nany, and then Nany says that she had a crush on Casey, sure, though Casey said on camera that they kissed on the season. Nany is annoyed, and she's mad that instead of Anissa following her to the bathroom at the club, she spoke to Casey to warn Casey about her. And Nany and Anissa apparently talked about this many times since the season, but before the episode aired, but she got annoyed again watching the episode. Anissa knew that she was third on the list once Jenna and Kayla arrived, so she got close to Casey on a friendship level. Anissa mentions that she let Nany berate and threaten her, and Nany will let her speak this time, since she did nothing to deserve it. Nany thinks Anissa did it for camera time and is threatening to close the laptop, and Nany claims that she isn't proud of it. If you're not proud of it, why are you getting so defensive of it? She claims that she doesn't want to do any more reality TV after this, which aged horrendously since she did 3 seasons right after this, and Double Agents was filmed not long after this whole event happening. And she's currently doing All Stars 5 as I speak. Nany cries, takes off her mic, and leaves. She does eventually come back, though she claims that she and Anissa are fine, where she mainly did that because Casey had something to lose, and Nany didn't. We go on to the Bailey and Casey segment, and Bailey claims that she never said that they were more than friends, but they had an intimate friendship out of closeness, but she was shocked that she chose Nany over Bailey. Casey does agree that they made a preseason alliance, but flipped when Casey threw her under the bus. Casey thought that Bailey threw her under the bus, and Bailey mentions that they haven't spoken since the season, and I believe that's the case up until this date. I know this was right before Bailey did Big Brother 22, just by looking at her hair, and the mess with her happening there. And it's ironic because Casey was supposed to be on that season as well, but she, as well as Josh, dropped out due to faulty COVID tests, which is why they're on Double Agent instead of Big Brother 22. So Wes and Bananas is spoken about, and they made a pregame alliance while at the VMA Awards. essentially, they were tired of one or both of them going home early and the others reaping the benefits of it. And it's ironic because Polly mentioned this recently about how a lot of the veterans were not liking the War of the World seasons due to them going home early. And I don't care to talk about the whole Bananas and West situation, so I'm just going to move on. People talk about Josh playing a safe, scared game and how he is so emotional, and then we move on to Ashley playing a snake game where she calls them out for pre-gaming before the season, and she goes on to every season with a fresh, clean slate, and she doesn't need to fake storylines, unlike other people. She tweeted about Jay and Bananas having the same ex-girlfriend. Technically, Morgan was Bananas' girlfriend at the time, and Jay mentioned that he had no issues with Bananas, and Ashley is right, that definitely was the elephant in the room. But she does regret bringing it up, since people don't like talking about their personal lives. Bananas never denied this, and he doesn't talk about his personal life on the show. Though Jay mentioned that yes, he and Bananas did have the same partner at one point. Swaggy and Josh's fight is discussed, and he doesn't do well with people calling him out of his name, though Josh does that to other people. But Josh does regret throwing a drink, and he had no idea how close the couple were with Wes. Billy talks about how it made no sense for him to do what he did, and Wes defends them to Josh, where Wes mentions that Josh needs to stop looking at i.e. Wes's Instagram right now, and it was just very weird. CT's loss against Jay is discussed, and so is Jay's underdog run, where Rogan was pretty much cancelled by this point, so he wasn't at the reunion. Obviously, they made it clear that he wasn't going to be at the reunion either. Kayla is questioned about her and Bear's relationship, and Bear isn't at the reunion since he's essentially cancelled. And Jordan wasn't at the reunion either, though Tori was, which is odd. So I guess the stuff trending about him online caused them to distance themselves from him for a bit. So Kayla mainly talks about how she hooked up with Bear because she was bored in the bunker and she was unhappy in her relationship, where she saw it as a way out. Nelson does apologize for his actions against Kayla, and she mentions how small and nasty a porta potty is, so she would never fuck there. But Nelson mentions that people do anything to get away from the cameras. She did hang out with Bear for 2 weeks in the UK before getting herself from her ex-boyfriend in the States, and she's now dating Sam, who will eventually become her husband. Nany rants about no one having her back, and she does leave the reunion. Jenna and Zach are at the reunion, and it's weird that he was at this one where he wasn't a part of the cast this season, but he wasn't at the reunion last season when he was a cast member there. Anyways, they're engaged and getting married early 2021, and of course the video calls are discussed. Zach is firm about his decision, and you literally see him cover his face and not look up, so part of him was embarrassed about it. Though if he stands firm in his decision, he shouldn't be embarrassed about anything. Tori mentioned that Jenna wrote something about how she's going to quit, but I guess once you get down there, you can't be too sure. There's some supposed conversation between Nany, Wes, and Jenna about her quitting that may not have been true, but that's pretty much the end of the reunion. So that concludes Total Madness, and while it isn't the worst season, it is easily the weakest of the Era 4 seasons that I have covered so far. I actually do think that the cast is pretty good, and it's unfortunate that they're wasted on the bunker and the shitty skull twist that made the season so much more boring. But this season did really well in the ratings, though a lot of that could have been due to COVID, where everyone was stuck in their houses and they needed something to watch. Where I think it got higher ratings than a lot of the seasons that aired within like the last 5 or so years up to this point, and that would carry on over to Double Agents, to the point where every single flagship season after this would have 19 main episodes and 2-part reunions. So I think the success of the season caused for the future seasons to be really, really dragged out when it comes to the episode count. I do feel like this is the last season that had some interesting drama or tense drama that was kind of close to the challenge as we know it, but then they started watering it down, and we did see that this season started the explosions, the dark clothing, and the kind of style of a substance when it comes to the dailies and making things overtly complicated, and they're really trying to push the fifth sport thing around here, and it just really didn't fit. Anyways, I don't have much else to say about the season. It's definitely in the bottom half of the seasons I've ranked so far, but I don't think it's a bottom tier season, since there are some enjoyable elements towards it. But of course, the D stuff really just made the season even worse, since had that not happened, it could have potentially been mid-tier in the upper half, but I have to go based on what we saw. And what we saw, especially with that last third, really just brings it down. So it'll be interesting getting to the more recent seasons and seeing how Era 4 continues to evolve. And this will be the last season that had a lot of the world's rookie crop. So I feel like this season is kind of like a transition from the War of the Worlds era and the Spies era, essentially. And yeah, that's my opinion on the season. Thank you all for watching. I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!